Welcome to Fast Pace, the new growth, leadership and management podcast featuring Josh Phegan and Dean Mackie. We wanted to peel back the layers on what happens in the world of fast-paced real estate agencies, from new leadership models to the management challenges we all face each day. This is about a new era in the estate agency sector. Rapid changes to business models, service lines, remuneration and growth present the greatest opportunities that we've ever seen. Sit back, get inspired, grow your skills and reimagine what's possible with Fast Pace. Every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Josh Phegan Digital. Leadership is a really important conversation inside of any business. Dean, we're going to talk about maybe some of the conversations around leadership in 2024. You know, what's always the same? What are the things that are changing? What are the flavors? We hear lots and lots of conversation around, diversity and inclusion type conversations. We hear a lot of stuff about what we should be doing to, create safe spaces for people. But yet at the end of the day, what is leadership all about? Are you a leader that people actually want to follow? Are you in a position that naturally you're helping people to build up their confidence? And what does servant leadership have to do with how we go to work inside organisations? Now, Dean, I got the chance to see Howard Bihar speak, who was the former CEO of Starbucks, and he introduced me to the concept of servant leadership. I'd never heard of it before at the time. It was basically this idea that traditionally you would see a pyramid, the CEO would be at the top of that pyramid, and everyone would then fall underneath them. What they then did is they literally just flipped the pyramid, and so that naturally the smallest part was at the bottom and the biggest part was at the top. And now the CEO is at the bottom of the organisation, and what they're actually there to do is to actually serve everyone else inside of the business. Dean, I thought that was a fascinating insight about, leadership in the modern age. It's no longer about some of the old school things we might have watched on the Mad Men episodes, but really the whole focus around what we can do to make people feel really valuable inside of our organisations and to provide incredible platforms for them to be personally successful. Dean, let's talk about leadership in 2024. Where are we going to go with this one? This could be a wild ride over the course of the next 8 or so minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Servanthood leadership is a very good concept. I'm a big subscriber to that. I think that it makes a lot of sense, and I think that if we as leaders see ourselves as needing to be a servant to the people in our business and all the brand, it really flips the way that you approach things. And and I think we need to see things differently because you've got this rapidly changing landscape, right? And I think we just got to be adaptable leaders, as we have been, but even more so in 2024 and beyond, because there are some key skills required to become a leader that we're constantly having to challenge ourselves with. I've got to tell you, I've been challenged with some stuff in the last few weeks that's made me go, okay, I've got to shift my approach on a few things because, priorities shift. Right, the importance of agility, and like you said, inclusivity, having some sort of purpose-driven mindset, I think, is really important right now. People need something to hang on to because it's not easy for people to adapt to change and the changing landscape. And then I also look at there's so many global challenges that are beyond our control, but some of them aren't either. Everyone's concerned about climate change and this and that, whatever. But equally, there's such a technological advancement going on. Mm-hmm. It's quite scary, and it impacts upon leadership approaches. The old way we did stuff, we can do it quite differently now, There's parts of jobs and whole functions that are changing by virtue of automation. So what does that mean for some of those roles? And so I think we've got big roles. I sort of probably got 4 or 5 things, Josh, I made a note on here to say. I think that, we just need to be able to display adaptability, and we need to really deal well with change management because we're in this constant space of embracing change, navigating uncertainty, and leading teams through transition, right? That's probably a big skill that many of us might not have had to spend a lot of time in, because it's same old, but it is what it is. But, our job as leaders is to sort of illuminate a pathway that we can bring people along with, and I think that's a really thing that we need to be clear on. The other thing is I think there's a much greater expectation or demand from people that you've got some level of emotional intelligence, and what I mean by that is that you're self-aware, and you've got some empathy, and your communication skills are good, because if people are looking for trust and they're looking for healthy team dynamics. So it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. It just means you have to be prepared to be vulnerable, to take feedback that that you're not perfect and you need to be real and care, right? So that's a really big one. I think some people have gotten away with not having to necessarily have emotional intelligence to be a leader. You just have to be keep the energy up, right? And I think at the moment there's so many strategic decisions and thinking that needs to happen around data, as an example. How do you make the complex simple? because I think it can become quite overwhelming. You know, I sat in front of someone the other day and I could see that they were just like, this is so overwhelming. But I just broke it down into a couple of basic things, and they said, oh, is that all it does? And I said, yeah. You know, and so you as a leader got to anticipate some of these things that happen, and you know, think about how you're going to make sound decisions based upon evidence. And you know, we went through a whole exercise the other day at an individual level as the business level and said, well, let's look at our strengths. Let's look at our weaknesses. Let's look at our opportunities and our threats. Let's do those things and do it together to create, you know, breaking it down instead of being this big jumbled issue, you know, but getting it down on paper and go, well, actually, the problem's only these two things, so we can actually work on that, right? Mm-hmm. You know, so I think it's so the top three, you know, adaptability, emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and then the last two that I'd suggest is really important in the current context is your leadership being very collaborative and empowering. So how do you foster collaborations in teams and encourage individual contribution, right? So because, you know, I think that we as a business have often had a lot of little individual silos running around, and I think that the days of that are getting numbered. It's getting increasingly hard to run a business with little individual silos and be effective as a group. So how do you encourage and create an environment where everyone can win together as opposed to it being win-lose? So collaboration's important. And really empowerment of, you know, we used to have what we call collaboration days last year, and we've moved it into co-creation days now. So we've shifted the emphasis of going, let's collaborate, which is, we think we've got collaboration under control. How do we now co-create? So how do I enable people to feel empowered to, let's actually challenge the model, let's actually break the model and put it back together. And it's actually led to some really good insights for us to change and pivot how we want to go forward over the next 3 years. Because what got us here won't get us there, right? So we think that's a really important thing in 2024 around leadership is that piece. And of course, for me, it's about continuous learning and development, right? I mean, at the end of the day, both individual leaders and their teams need to stay relevant to adapt to our changing environment. So I think the big theme for me, Josh, here is flexibility, adaptable, changing environment. How can we make it easier, simple and safe for our team to succeed in that environment?
Dean, you know that I've been a massive fan of Tom Peters' work over the years, and there's a couple of his sayings that literally just come ringing in my brain when I think about this sort of stuff on leadership, and he's like, you must care. You know, so demonstrate that about the level of care that you have for your people, for the organisation, for its market success. The second thing he says, be interested. And I kind of love that, you know, be interested in people, be interested in what's going on in your markets, be interested in how you adapt and change, you know, all of these key topics that you're bringing up. And then I think, okay, great. And one of my greatest skill sets as a leader is to think about how do I question to coach to the solution. So if I think about leader model, how do I make sure that naturally I'm building people as leaders inside the organisation, as opposed to potentially being leader-follower model where I am the leader and you shall follow, but instead, hey, you know what, Dean, what do you think we should do here? How do you reckon we would do that? How would we tackle that? To empower you and to grow you up so that naturally you own the strategy that you created rather than me saying, hey, Dean, you need to do this. And if you start to think about your delivery and about how you coach, how you actually have conversations with people to provide advice, and what are some of the things that you might use as key words that allow people to let you in. So I often say to people, say, hey, Dean, permission to coach. You go, oh, what do you mean? So, mate, I've seen something that I reckon I could help you with on improvement. Are you open to it? Yeah, no, I'm open to that. Okay, great. Hey, I see what you did here. I love that. Do more of that. But have you thought about this? What would happen if we did this or this? And actually, when you're talking about that co-creation, bringing people into the space, say, Dean, there's three things that we'd normally do here. There's this one, or maybe there's a third option that I'm just not seeing. What are your thoughts? So bringing someone into the conversation to start to think differently. What people want is that people who are quite firm on their principles as a leader, that you understand that you have to live out the values more than anyone else inside of your organisation, that you need to be in a position that you are the role model around what actually happens, but you need to make sure that you actually are really connecting with people in a really powerful way. That whole conversation of the metaphorical hug, the high five when someone walks into your organisation, the handshake when it's appropriate to do so, is a really important part about actually really connecting with people and showing that, you know what, you are there for them to be highly successful. And that's really when you get your ego out of the way. And this is one of my favourites. I've got a CEO that I work with who he's got plenty of car parks out the back of his office, but he doesn't park there because the car parks are for his people. And he actually hires a little car park well away, probably about 500 or 600 metres away. He actually goes and, pays for that himself and actually goes and parks there himself. So then that way his people who are coming in and out of the office all the time have got access to the car park rather than his car sitting in the director's car park all day. And it's that really simple stuff around what it is that you do, to make that business fun again and to really get clear that you're there to actually serve your people and to do great things. leadership is a never-ending task. Make sure you read plenty of books. There's some pretty phenomenal ones out there on leadership. The most important part, judge yourself as a leader and how would I be seen by others and what can I do to improve?
I agree. I think leadership's one of those constantly challenging things. Sometimes you think you got it right and then someone holds the mirror back up in your face and you realise that you don't, So I think and you've got to be prepared to give a bit. I've got to say, Josh, I'll say here as a leader, there's been times at which myself as an individual, I have a certain perspective on something and someone else might have a different one. And sometimes I've found myself basically dismissing their point of view or their reality. Now, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily agreeing with that person's perception on that particular moment, but just acknowledging that that's their reality changes the way that you go into that scenario and the way that you can unfold that relationship, right? Because otherwise, you're turning off the opportunity to take a lesson and learn and say, well, actually, hold on a minute. Let me reconsider that. So I think not sticking to your guns, and being open to understanding that, your reality is not the only one's really important because, what you want to do is become a catalyst for innovation in your business, and you want to become, the challenges allow the business to transform into opportunities. You've got to have that headspace. So I think, caring and listening and keeping your pulse right and holding the mirror back up in your own face is really important.